Exploring and analyzing of data. In this session, we will talk about the exploring and analyzing of data, how a machine can explore and analyze the data, classification and regression. Classification and regression are the two types of exploring and analyzing of the data. We can analyze and explore the data in these two categories, classification and regression. Let's first talk about the classification, what we mean by the classification. So classification can be defined as classification uses informative attributes based on past data history and predicts the class label. It classifies data based on the training set and values class labels in a classifying attribute and uses it in classifying new data. Look, what we do in classification, we use the informative attributes based on that past data history. We have a past data history. Based on that past data history, we use informative attributes which can predict the output of the model. It classifies data based on the training set. We have proper classes. For example, we have class 1, class 2. We want to divide the data in class 1 and class 2. So we have the class labels, the class information. So based on the training set and the class information, we classify the data. So based on the training set and the values, the class information, we can classify the new data in the proper classes. Look, classification is the term where the machine learning can explore and analyze the data. What we do in classification, we use the information based on past data history. We have a past data. Based on that past data history, we use that information and predict the class label. Class label means the class information. For example, we have two classes, class 1 and class 2. So we can predict that class label. It actually classifies data based on the training set, the values, the information of the classes, so that we can easily classify the new data into proper classes. That's what we do in classification. In short words, we can say that classification produces classes. We classify the data into proper classes. Moreover, we can say that in classification, the training data, observations, measurements, etc. are escorted by labels which shows the class of observations, measurements, where the new data is classified based on the training set. E.g., a bank calculates the risk assessment based on data history and check that whether someone can take a loan or not. Look, in classification, the training data, which is the observations, measurements, are escorted by the labels. What we mean by the label? Label means it has proper tags. There are proper tags for the training data, which shows the class of observations. We can identify the class of the data with the help of that labels, with the help of that tags of the training data, so that we can classify the new data based on training set. As I told you, in classification, the training data has proper labels, proper tags, proper information. Based on that training data, we can classify the new data. For example, a bank calculates the risk assessment on the data history and check that whether someone can take a loan or not. For example, if someone want to take a loan from the bank first calculates the risk assessment. He first check the data history, the past data history. So based on that data history, the bank can calculate that whether this person is eligible for the loan or not. Because risk assessment is important, the bank must calculate the risk assessment. He cannot simply take the risk. He can only take the risk based on the data history. If you have a good data history, then you might be able to take a loan. If you have a bad data history, the bank can reject your loan proposal. So in classification, we put the training data to the machine model. This training data has proper labels, proper information, proper tags, which keeps information. And based on that proper labels of the training data, we can classify the new data in proper classes. As I gave you an example that a bank calculates the risk assessment based on the data history. We can also say that classification tells us about low or high risk, like this person has disease or not. As I told you, classification produces classes. the data is classified into proper classes. So in other words, we can say that classification tells us about the low and high risk, whether there is a low risk or the high risk. So it basically says about the low risk and the high risk. For example, if a doctor do a checkup of a person, he can analyze the low risk and the high risk of the disease. So there are plenty of examples where we do classification with the help of the machine learning. Now let's talk about the regression. We just saw the classification. The regression is the second term of the machine learning where we can explore and analyze the data. So let's talk about the regression here. We can say that regression uses continuous values to predict next value, like prediction of stock market for tomorrow or weather forecasting. Basically what we do in regression, we use continuous values. Continuous values are used to predict the next value, the upcoming next value, like prediction of the stock market for tomorrow. So we can only predict the stock market for the tomorrow based on the continuous value which are coming all along. Or weather forecasting, we can forecast the weather for the tomorrow or for the day after tomorrow based on the continuous values. So we can do this sort of prediction with the help of the regression. We can only explore and analyze the data of the market, of the stock market, or the weather forecasting based on the continuous values in regression.